AARP of Wisconsin. And now, the CEO and president of the foundation, Michelle Vetterkamp.
Good evening. Wisconsin's radio and television broadcasters are committed to continuing our public affairs broadcast tradition by sponsoring debates in major Wisconsin political campaigns. This year, the Wisconsin broadcast continuing our public affairs broadcast tradition by sponsoring debates in major Wisconsin political campaigns. This year, the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association is hosting 2 statewide gubernatorial debates, last week's debate in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and tonight's debate in Milwaukee. This evening's debate will engage the 2 leading candidates for Wisconsin governor, Republican candidate Governor Scott Walker and Democratic candidate Mary Burke. This debate is made possible in part through generous grants from the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities and AARP of Wisconsin. I would now like to introduce the moderator for tonight's debate, veteran reporter for WUWM Milwaukee Public Radio, Erin Toner.
Thank you, Michelle. The goal of this debate is to help voters make informed choices on November 4th by encouraging the candidates to share specific ideas on how they plan to govern Wisconsin. Here is tonight's format. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. The order was decided by coin flip. After opening statements, we turn to our panel for questions. The format, as approved by the candidates, requires each question be directed at both candidates and not one or the other. Each candidate will have 1 minute, 30 seconds to respond, followed by 30-second rebuttals. We will alternate the order so each candidate has a chance for first and last words. Candidate Ms. Burke and candidate Governor Walker, please provide responses that answer the panelists' question, are detailed, and stay on topic. If you give less than specific answers, I may call on our panelists to restate the question and then give each of you an additional 30 seconds for a focused reply. Please adhere to the time limits you have agreed to. There is a countdown clock visible to both of you. If you exceed your limit, I will remind you that your time is up. Should you persist, your microphone will be silenced. We will conclude this debate with 3-minute closing statements from each candidate. And finally, as we did last week's debate in Eau Claire, we'll be addressing the candidates as Governor Walker and Ms. Burke. With that, let's begin with 2-minute opening statements. Ms. Burke, you won the coin flip, so you are first.
Thank you. Well, thank you to the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association, Governor Walker, all of you at home watching tonight, and my family, my mother and relatives who are here with me tonight. This election is about Wisconsin's future. Not only can we do better, but we must do better so that everyone has the fair shot to get ahead, as long as they're willing to do the hard work. Governor Walker sees it a little differently. He said, and I quote, "We don't have a jobs problem." Well, the typical Wisconsin family has seen a drop in their family income of nearly $3,000 over the last 4 years. That's a jobs problem. People are working harder and harder, but they're seeing less for it. It's not fair, and it's not good for our economy. Instead of building up the middle class, Governor Walker has aimed his tax breaks to those at the top, and it's not working. Wisconsin is dead last in the Midwest in terms of job growth under his watch. That's a jobs problem. Rather than cherry-picking a few winners at the top, I want to make sure that every Wisconsin family has a fair shot to get ahead as long as they're prepared to do the hard work. A fair shot means, first and foremost, great, affordable public education, starting at kindergarten all the way through college. I'm going to invest in our schools, not cut them, and I'm going to make college more affordable. A fair shot also means a growing economy with growing small businesses, raising the minimum wage, and creating more good-paying jobs. A fair shot means reducing the tax burden to those that are being squeezed. And a fair shot means government that is accountable, fiscally responsible, and working for you, the people of Wisconsin, not the powerful special interests. And finally, it means an end to the divisiveness. We should remember we're all on the same team, and we're proud Wisconsinites first and foremost, not Democrats or Republicans. Tonight, I look forward to sharing my plans with you for a Wisconsin that gives everyone a fair shot and a bright future. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Walker.
Good evening. Thanks to the WBA for sponsoring this event, and thanks to our moderator and our panelists, and particular thanks to my wife and my 2 sons, Matt and Alex, who are with us tonight. And thanks to all of you at home for tuning in for what I hope will be an hour of open and honest discussion about the future of this great state. I've got great news. More than 8,400 new private sector jobs were created this past month. That's right, 8,400 new jobs. That's the best September we've had for private sector job creation in more than a decade. On top of that, unemployment's now down to 5.5%, the lowest we've seen since October of 2008. Wisconsin ranks fifth in the nation for new manufacturing jobs. And that's why we've invested more than $100 million into worker training to help people get the skills that they need for those good-paying jobs available right now. The most recent state fiscal year just ended with a cash balance of some $517 million. And the next state budget will begin with a surplus of over $500 million, $535 million to be exact. That means we can invest in our priorities, things like economic development, quality schools, our UW system, our technical colleges, helping needy families, children, and seniors, investing in our infrastructure, public safety, and veteran services, and particularly helping people who are victims of domestic violence, people like my friend Terry Jandusa Nikolai, who's here today and has been such an inspirational advocate. Overall, Wisconsin is much better off than it was 4 years ago, and we've got a plan to make it even better for the next 4 years. I invite people to go to scottwalker.com and look at the details of that plan. And I look forward to sharing those details with you here tonight. Working together, we can continue to move Wisconsin forward, and that's why I ask for your vote on November 4th.
Thank you, Governor Walker. Our first question tonight is from Charles Benson, political reporter at today's TMJ4.
Good evening. Let's talk about some of those budget numbers. This week, the state's nonpartisan number crunchers told us Wisconsin has a $517 million surplus. At the same time, we are hearing that the state faces a $1.8 billion projected shortfall in the next two-year budget. Voters are asking, how can both be true? My first question, do you agree there is a surplus, and what is your priority for that money? Secondly, do you agree there is a projected deficit in the next budget? And if so, what would you do specifically about it? Ms. Burke, you go first.
Well, it is important that the people of Wisconsin actually understand the financial position of our state. I have been a business person my entire career, balanced a lot of budgets, and sometimes the numbers can be confusing. The fact is the $517 million refers to just a cash balance. So if you have a lot of bills that you have that haven't come due or you haven't paid them yet, it might look like you have more money, but if you owe a lot of bills, you don't really have that much. And that's the case here. We actually have less of a cash balance than had been projected at this point. Also, we have a lot of deferred bills. I mean, there are UW colleges and universities that are putting building projects on hold in order to inflate this number to make it look better than it is. So we have to be honest with the people of Wisconsin. And under Governor Walker, he has spent money that we don't have. And in fact, this year we're in right now, is projected to spend $400 million more than we take in. So the way I would approach this, and the 1.8 budget projected budget deficit in terms of billions of dollars, is we have to make tough decisions. We have to get the economy growing so we have more revenues coming in. We have to make sure we prioritize our spending based on economic development and getting our economy going, because that's what's going to make sure Wisconsin is in the strongest position financially, is when we get our economy back up and running.
Thank you. Governor Walker.
Well, there's no disputing the facts, and the facts are clear. Wisconsin just finished its last fiscal year, June 30th of 2014. The numbers just came out this week with a $517 million surplus. The next state budget will begin with a surplus of $535 million. That $1.8 billion number you hear out there actually comes from an assumption based on zero growth. That just doesn't happen. The reality is that that's not a factor out there. We have seen the fact that this next state budget is going to be based on a surplus because we take it on 5-year average revenue growth, and the fact that if you combine that with the fact that just making some reasonable adjustments to the budget, as we have over this past year, will put us in a place where we have a surplus. And the priorities we make will be the ones we just talked about. And I'm going to ask our moderator for a second. That clock just changed twice. I had 1:30 and it clicked down from 30 down. Is that the way it's supposed to be going? I thought we had 1:30, but it switched from 30 to 30 to a minute now.
You do have 1:30. So we're going to check the situation there. But let's go to
I was closing it quickly. I apologize to the viewers out there, but it was a little odd, I think, for both
Yeah, I
of us.
agree. Yeah.
We're going to check it. So now, Ms. Burke, your 30-second rebuttal. Let's make sure we have 30 seconds on the clock. I think we're set.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
The fact remains that we have a $1.8 billion projected deficit going into the next biennium. This is a difference of $2 billion from the last budget, and it is because of the fiscally irresponsible decisions that Governor Walker made, spending money we don't have, and because the revenues from the state are lagging because the economy is lagging. So this is going to be a tough budget, but as governor, I'm prepared to take on those tough decisions for the next budget.
Governor, your rebuttal.
4 years ago, we inherited a $3.6 billion budget deficit. We turned it into a surplus. We did it the old-fashioned way. We actually paid our bills off. We paid back the money that was owed and raided from the transportation fund. We paid back the money that was taken out of the patient compensation fund. We even had to pay money back to Minnesota. And so the rainy day fund today is 165 times bigger than when we took office. Our pension's the only one fully funded in the country. We have paid our bills off, and we're putting the focus on fiscal responsibility. But we will have a $535 million surplus in the next state budget based upon the reasonable projections that were laid out in the nonpartisan legislative fiscal bureau's memo to the co-chairs.
Okay, let's go to our next question from Kent Wainscott, political reporter at WISN 12.
Ms. Burke, Governor, this debate is taking place in downtown Milwaukee, and you have both often spoken about the importance to all of Wisconsin of having a thriving economy in the state's largest city. But unemployment in inner-city Milwaukee, particularly among African-American men, remains exceptionally high. Some put that number at 50% or higher. Voters here tell us that if there are jobs, they're not here, they don't have access to them, and they're desperate for change sooner rather than later. They can't wait for a long-term fix. So, can you give us some specific examples of what you can and will do to tackle the unemployment problem in the short term in the heart of the state's largest city? And this goes to Governor Walker first.
Yeah, this is a real problem, a real issue. I noticed that years ago when I was the Milwaukee County Executive. I tried to act on it as governor. In fact, I think it was April of 2012, we announced our Transform Milwaukee project, and I'm pleased the announcement we made back then we fulfilled. We projected out $200 million worth of investments, $100 million from the state led by WBA that could leverage another $100 million here in the community to try and invest in new developments, new projects, new things that would put people to work, not just with jobs, but with family supporting jobs. That's not enough, though. We've added to that as well, the Transform Milwaukee program for jobs. It's part of the transitional jobs we've done elsewhere in the state. And we're going to build off of that. I've asked Rebecca Clayfish, our Lieutenant Governor, and former State Representative Beth Coggs, who's got a long-standing tradition here in Milwaukee, to head up a task force on minority unemployment to tackle that very issue. They made a series of recommendations. It's part of the reason we've done academic and career plans that start this next school year, to start on the long-term issue you talked about. But in the short term, we need capital investments here in the city of Milwaukee. We've made that by putting in the heart of the city, our new Department of Children and Families headquarters. We've done it through investment we made to help the Global Water Center. We made that most recently in the money that we invested into an Energy Innovation Center on the near north side of Milwaukee, which is in the heart of some of the highest levels of unemployment. We're going to continue to build off of that and not just talk about it, putting our money where our mouth is.
Ms. Burke.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the clock was set. Thank you. This is a real issue because Wisconsin cannot have a thriving economy without a Milwaukee economy that is thriving as well. And the Milwaukee economy hasn't come back at the same rate that the rest of the state has, or even the rest of the country. So the rest of the country has gotten back the 8.7 million jobs that it lost during the Great Recession. In Milwaukee, under the jobs record of Governor Walker, it would be 6 more years before Milwaukee County would get to pre-recession employment levels. That is not good enough. And Governor Walker has had 4 years, and just forming task forces now isn't good enough. What I would do, based on my experience at Trek Bicycle, but also as an entrepreneur myself, I'd first and foremost use a new concept that's used in Cleveland called anchor institutions. You use anchor institutions like healthcare, hospitals, educational institutions that actually work with communities surrounding it to start new businesses, help them to grow those businesses, give them contracts. We also need to invest right in the local communities, in neighborhoods where we have boarded up storefronts. Give people the business skills and the capital they need to start their own retail businesses there. Hire people locally, keep the profits locally, and gain those small business skills. That's how we can immediately start to create jobs in the Central City.
Rebuttal, Governor Walker.
Well, that $100 million I talked about is more than just talk. We've invested it. We talked about it a couple years ago. We've invested it. We've leveraged another $100 million on top of that. On top of that, we put money into the African American Chamber of Commerce for a revolving loan fund. We've done the same sort of thing with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as well. But let's be clear. My opponent just referenced Governor Doyle. His policies led to the loss of 133,000 jobs 4 years ago in this state. Those are policies my opponent at the time said she supported entirely and now is backing away from. We've had to clean up that mess, and we'll continue to do it going forward.
Ms. Burke.
Well, getting back to the Central City in Milwaukee, the most important thing we have to do is focus not only on the jobs themselves, but on job skills and on education. And I look forward to taking on the tough issues around education in Milwaukee, because that is what is going to drive economic development and jobs in the long term. And we have to make sure that people have the skills and the training and a career plan when they leave high school as to how they're going to make sure they get that, along with affordable access to higher education.
Thank you. Let's move on. The next question is from CBS 58 News anchor and reporter Mike Strelo.
Thank you, Erin. Ms. Burke, Governor Walker, both of you have said that you need more information from an economic impact study before taking a position on a high-stakes Kenosha casino proposal. What specifically are you going to need to see in that study that will convince you to say yes or no? And furthermore, what does your gut say? What does your moral or philosophical compass tell you about expanded gaming here in the state of Wisconsin? Ms. Burke.
Well, I look forward as governor to taking on this issue because it is very important to the people of Kenosha, also in Milwaukee. And what we have seen is southeastern Wisconsin's economy is lagging. Now, Governor Walker has had 14 months to do this, and before this was ever even approved by the federal government, he laid out 3 criteria that he said he would use to make that decision. He has now flip-flopped, and he is not even using those criteria, and in addition, not one of those criteria actually had to do with job creation and economic development, which is actually the most important issue we face here. So I would make sure we have an impartial study that looks at the impact of the casino, both on Milwaukee and Kenosha, state as a whole. We are in competition with other states like Iowa and Illinois, not only for gaming, but for entertainment. And I have said that if it shows that it creates a significant number of new jobs and it adds to Wisconsin's employment and tax base, that I would approve that casino. But we do need to have that impartial study done, and as soon as that is finished, I will make that decision. I will not kick the can down the road as Governor Walker has done.
Governor?
For us, I love the Kenosha area. I'm there often. As the mayor in Kenosha, as the Pleasant Prairie Village president, others know, I spend a lot of time down there, and I'm pleased to see how many new jobs we've helped create, many of which have come from Northern Illinois across the border, whether it's Catalyst exhibits, whether it's Uline just in the last year or so announcing 2 waves of 500 more jobs at a time, whether it's Kennel Manufacturing or so many others, and certainly Amazon in the town of Summer. In fact, the Milwaukee Business Journal put out a story a couple months ago that talked about something like 4,000 new jobs in the Kenosha area over the last couple of years. So I want more jobs in Kenosha and southeastern Wisconsin. But the biggest thing holding us up right now is really 2 words: Jim Doyle. Jim Doyle put in compacts nearly a decade ago that specifically say if a casino is put up in Kenosha, at least one of our tribal governments could hold out on at least about $100 million or more. They've already talked about withholding part of those payments to date. And for me, a $100 million hole in the budget is pretty significant, not just for Kenosha, but for people all across the state. If we didn't have that factor out there, it would be a completely different discussion. So we're going to take the full amount of time that we need to make sure we can get to a point where we can create those jobs. We can have a win-win-win, create the jobs there, protect jobs in other parts of the state, and make sure we do that without creating a $100 million hole in the state budget.
Your rebuttal, Ms. Burke?
Well, there's no doubt that it's not an easy situation, but that's where you have to be a tough negotiator and make sure that you have the best interests of the state as a whole in mind, that you understand how exactly you can bring these parties together to do something that is going to be good for the state and for southeastern Wisconsin. And I think we have that opportunity here. But we have to make sure that we get people to the table. That's what I've done through my entire career, is build those type of public-private partnerships and negotiations that make sure we end up on the right side of this.
Governor Walker, rebuttal.
Again, this is one of those where my opponent and other supporters of her criticize the time we've taken when they completely ignored the fact the federal government took 9 years. Both the Obama and the Bush administration dragged this out because they needed the time necessary to make a decision. We're going to take the time necessary to make sure we don't put a $100 million hole in the state budget. We started negotiating last year with the tribal governments involved. We're going to continue that, but we're always going to put the interest and the stewardship of the taxpayers' money first.
Mike Strelo, I see that you'd like to follow up here and press for specifics. Would you please restate your question, and then we'll give each additional 30 seconds.
Ms. Burke, you said a significant number of jobs. Is there a set number, 1,000, 2,000, or a certain revenue number that you need to see in that report to say, okay, I'm with it?
Well, it would certainly have to be in excess of 500 jobs, but I think we have to look at not only the direct jobs that get created, but also the multiplier effect from additional people spending that money in the community. So I would look at both the direct and indirect jobs.
Yeah, for me, a win-win-win is making sure we add jobs in Kenosha, we don't subtract jobs in other parts of the state, and we ultimately do so in a way that doesn't create a $100 million hole in the budget.
Thank you. Our next question from Fox 6 News anchor Ted Perry.
Good evening to you both. Sadly, it's not being used this fall due to an epic collapse by the Milwaukee Brewers, something that isn't blamed on either one of you, by the way. But Miller Park is here, and it would not be here without the public support and behind-the-scenes persistence of then-Governor Tommy Thompson. It's very likely whichever one of you wins next month will have to deal with an arena issue for the Milwaukee Bucks, who, according to new reports, could be Seattle-bound if a new facility isn't built. Unlike the casino project, there really is a shot clock here. So can you tonight declare whether you'll use your political clout and capital, a la Tommy Thompson, to allow public funding for a new arena, or will you pledge to block the use of any state tax dollars needed to build the project? And I believe, Governor, it's your turn to inbound the ball here.
Thank you. Good metaphor. No, I think it's an important issue. I mean, I've got two sons here who love going down to see Bucks games, but not just for them, but for people all across the state, not just here in Milwaukee. This is a state asset. Quality of life involves a whole series of things, and part of it are attractions like this. What I have said in the past, and I'll repeat here again tonight, is I do not support a sales tax or another new tax, as been talked about in the past for other projects, for this particular project. What I do think, though, we should look at is what is the actual value. I don't mean the theoretical value. What does the Milwaukee Bucks as a team actually bring into the state of Wisconsin in terms of revenues to the state that we would otherwise lose? Because I think, Ted, you're right. It's pretty clear the NBA has said by 2017, if they're not up and going here, they're going somewhere else, whether it's Seattle or anywhere else out there. And we don't want that. So part of our goal is to try and assess, and we've been working on this over the past few months, assess what is the actual amount the Milwaukee Bucks and their players, because remember the players, not only the Bucks, but any of the visiting players are taxed on a prorated basis every time they play a game here in the state of Wisconsin. What is the actual dollar amount? And therefore, what will we lose? And I think that is a legitimate basis upon which to begin any discussion with members of the legislature and the public.
Your response, Ms. Burke?
Well, I grew up in Heartland, not too far away, and I certainly remember watching the Bucks when they won that NBA championship in 1971. So I know the glory that we can see as a community here from having a thriving NBA franchise. And as I mentioned previously, what we have seen right now is in Milwaukee County has not come back from the recession. 6 more years until we get to pre-recession employment. And so we have to look at what investments are needed in order to have a thriving Milwaukee economy. That represents a lot, not only directly to Milwaukee, but the other communities around it, and certainly to the state. I know from my experience at Trek Bicycles, sometimes you have to make investments in order to grow. The public option should be on the table, but it should be the last one. And we have to protect the taxpayers here. But we also have to understand the impact it has on the community, not only the direct impact, but the indirect impact on Milwaukee, because we have to make sure that Milwaukee is a thriving community, that we are growing jobs, that we're able to attract and keep young people in our communities. And it is things like sports teams, cultural institutions that play a large role in that. So I want to look at this from a business perspective. What is the impact of that team overall on the community? How can we bring people together in public-private partnership to make this happen while protecting the taxpayer?
Governor Walker.
Yeah, again, I love Milwaukee. My kids were born at St. Joseph's here. I've got one son who goes to school here. I got another one who goes to school over in Madison. But I love this community. I love this state. And I want to make sure my sons and others, sons and daughters like them, their age and those to come, want to stay here. And part of it is quality of life, which is not just the Bucks, it's everything else here in Milwaukee and all the other great assets we have across the state. But I want to make sure that we do so in a responsible way. The tax and spend policies we saw in place before I came into office are largely responsible for the jobs we lost in the past. I don't want to repeat those mistakes in the future.
Ms. Burke.
This is an important decision for Milwaukee. I applaud Senator Cole and the new owners, along with additional community leaders that are putting more resources into this. So we have to recognize that there is going to be a lot of private investment that is going to be behind this. And so as governor, I'm going to look at how we make this happen. Again, need to protect the taxpayers, but a lot is riding on the line here, and I'm going to take a leadership position to make this happen.
Thank you. Back to Charles Benson for the next question.
Well, we've seen a huge TV battle over all these ads saying who would do a better job creating jobs. You've thrown a lot of numbers at us. But the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel analyzed the jobs numbers and found Wisconsin lagged the nation in private sector growth for most of the last 10 years. That includes Governor Walker's years and Ms. Burke's years as Commerce Secretary. So let me bring up, since we were talking sports here, if fans expect the Packers to win the Super Bowl every year, why shouldn't taxpayers expect better results? Question, give me some plays that will allow the state to outperform the country. Ms. Burke, you go first.
Yeah. Well, it's why I'm running for governor, because we are not doing the things necessary to make sure that Wisconsin has a growing, thriving economy. And it is going to take a lot more than what is being done right now. And that's why I laid out in my Invest for Success Jobs Plan 5 core strategies on how we can make this work. These are 5 strategies that are unique to Wisconsin, are ones that I think will work here. They're the best ideas that I gathered from across the country. 2 of them, I could go on for a lot more than 1:30 on this, but it is about workforce development, training, college affordability. It's about small businesses being able to grow. And right now we're 46th in the country in terms of new businesses started. And it is new business and small business growth that actually creates 70% of the new jobs that are being created. So when we're the bottom 5 in the country, it's not good enough. We have to make more capital accessible to small businesses. We have to make sure that we can attract and keep good people in the workforce, that they stay in our communities, that we have a strong public education system, whether it's kindergarten or all the way through university. We have to bring down the cost of college, because 70% of the jobs created in the future require education and training past high school. So I lay out these strategies. It is going to take a lot more, and right now we do not have a plan or a vision on how we can make sure Wisconsin is actually leading the Midwest instead of lagging.
Well, we got an exciting plan, and we're building off it. And one of the things I'm particularly excited about is part of my opponent's plan is based in large part, dozens of the ideas in that plan are based on things we're doing. Some of the clusters we focused in on, like just down the way here, the investment we made in the Global Water Center to help clean water technology here, the investment we made in Milwaukee just up the way at the Energy Innovation Center, similar to being at just over in Chippewa Valley for the new energy center they've got there at the Chippewa Valley Technical College. We've invested in those clusters, but we also need to build on our bread and butter. Manufacturing and agriculture, we just put in place new incentives that are going to accelerate the amount of growth that we have in those areas, in those key core industries for the state of Wisconsin in the coming years. But it's not your parents or grandparents manufacturing anymore. It's a whole new wave, and we've opened up export markets. In fact, in agriculture, we've seen a 17% increase in the first 6 months of this year alone in ag-based exports. And so it's strengthening those areas, but going into other areas, food and beverage, clean water, clean energy, biotech, sciences, others out there, things we've invested on over the past couple of years, but really are evolving. in our plan called Continuing Wisconsin's Comeback. It's also, in this area I think where we do agree on, it is about investing in education, and particularly in higher education, but with targeted investments. We just put $28 million more this summer into buying down the wait list into our technical colleges to help more people get into not only advanced manufacturing, but into IT, into healthcare, into other emerging industries in our state's economy. We want to grow off of that.
Ms. Burke, rebuttal?
Well, the Journal-Sentinel reviewed Governor Walker's jobs plan and said it's more of the same. And frankly, that's just not going to get the job done. It's not going to move the needle. We have to be a lot more aggressive about the investment that we have. And what I've seen from Governor Walker is he somehow believes you give tax breaks to those at the top and special interests, and it somehow creates jobs. I'm a business person. I know how jobs get created, and it means you have to have that small business growth. You have to have workforce training. You have to have a real plan, and it has to be aggressive.
Governor Walker.
8,400 new jobs were created last month. That's the best September for private sector job creation in more than a decade. The unemployment rate's down to 5.5%. That's the lowest we've seen since October of 2008. And I think the voters should look, compare apples to apples. The only time in the last 25 years the unemployment rate in the state has been worse is during the 3 years my opponent was the Secretary of Commerce, the head of commerce in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin ranked 42nd in the country for job creation during that time frame. That's not the recipe for going forward.
Thank you. Our next question is from Kent Wainscott.
And I'd like to ask each of you about your reaction to a jobs-related issue that you have faced in your campaign. There's a saying in politics, the buck stops here. But Governor Walker, when asked this week about your failure to reach your stated goal of 250,000 new jobs during this term, you blamed that on uncertainty among employers due to the Capitol protests and recalls. And Ms. Burke, this week you blamed the controversy surrounding the multiple copied passages in a plan you say is your jobs plan on a consultant, saying that he shouldn't have used the same words. So how much responsibility or blame do you personally accept for those situations having occurred, and should the voters hold you accountable? Governor, we begin with you.
Yeah, well, before we took office, as I've pointed out before, Wisconsin lost over 133,000 jobs, in large part because of the policies of my predecessor, Governor Jim Doyle, policies my opponent says she supports entirely. Back then, as I was traveling the state, as I mentioned last week in our debate, I met people like Sandy from the Wausau area who'd taken a pay cut and then ultimately lost her job, or someone like Michael, as I mentioned, from Heartland, who'd been a press operator for 20 years, only to see his job eliminated during the downsizing. Those were real people with real families and communities all across the state. And so I set high. I set a big goal, 250,000 jobs to make up for those jobs lost, and aim big for the future, because I believe in the people of the state. I believe in Wisconsin. And while we're not done yet, we've come a long way, over 100,000 new jobs in the 3.5 years since we've been in office. We're not done yet, though. There's plenty more work to be done. And I think as voters look at the contrast, they're not going to blame us or criticize us, I should say, for aiming big. I think people want leaders that have big goals. I would ask, though, that voters look at the contrast between the two of us. In the last 3 years, we created nearly twice, as many jobs as were created during the 3 years that my opponent was in charge of the Department of Commerce under Governor Doyle. That time in this state, we were 42nd in the country for job creation. We're now, having just come off of a September, it's the best September for private sector job creation we've had in more than a decade. I think that's a good sign for the future.
Ms. Burke.
Well, with the number of times that Governor Walker has mentioned Jim Doyle, it's clear that he'd rather be running against him than me. But the hair alone should tell you we're two very different people. I'm a business executive, and that's the experience that I bring to this. And as Secretary of the Department of Commerce, I'd like to clarify, because the unemployment rate was 4.8%, and we had 50,000 more jobs than we have currently. Governor Walker is cherry-picking a lot of numbers, but the fact is that we are not keeping up with the rest of the country in terms of job creation. 10 Midwestern states, and we're 10th when you take the entirety of the term that he has been in office. Now, I know we can do a lot better, but we do need leadership, and we need a real plan, a solid plan. And that is my jobs plan. And I have been straight from the start about saying these were the best ideas that we need to make sure that Wisconsin has a thriving, growing economy. And I sat down with a number of people, from Michael Porter, who is the global guru on clusters, to other folks who are experts in those fields. And the consultant that I used, I cut ties with when I realized that he had used similar ideas in other economic development plans. But great economic development plans are about great ideas. And actually, the more they are used elsewhere and tested and proven successful, that's what's going to make sure that we are able to move Wisconsin's economy forward. So as governor, the buck will stop with me, and in my jobs plan, I lay out the metrics on how people can measure me on the jobs that we're doing.
Governor Walker, rebuttal.
Yeah, this is one of the things that people hate about politics, is when somebody says one thing and does something different. When my opponent worked for Jim Doyle, she said, quote, "I support Governor Doyle's policies entirely." Now that she's running and Governor Doyle's not so popular, she's changed. Same sort of thing with the plan out there, the jobs plan. My opponent's campaign said this was a body of work based on her time at Harvard Business School and based on her personal experience, and then we found out somebody else did that plan. I'm all for taking good ideas. I used an idea that Governor Jack Markell, a Democrat from Delaware, proposed 2 years ago. I just credited him for it. That's the difference out there with leadership.
Ms. Burke.
Well, Governor Walker is just trying to distract from his own jobs failure and failure of achieving the promise that he created. And my jobs plan is based on my experience. But to run hundreds of attack ads against me and to try to question my integrity is just trying to distract from that failure on jobs. And that is something that is not accurate, and also it is something that doesn't reflect Wisconsin's future and the plans for how we're going to move forward. And that's what my jobs plan does.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question from Mike Strelo.
This DMV report shows 185 people died, 2,600 others were injured in drunk driving-related crashes in Wisconsin last year alone. Wisconsin is the only state in the nation where a first drunk driving offense is a ticket and not a crime. The two candidates for Wisconsin Attorney General do not support criminalizing first offense drunken driving. Do you? And if not, what are your specific ideas to deal with this serious problem here? Ms. Burke.
Yes, actually, I am on record as saying that I think it should be a misdemeanor. Right now, there are not enough consequences for that first offense, and I think we have to make sure that there are consequences. Not only is it 185 deaths, it's 5,000 crashes that have alcohol related. So this is costing us, costing our society a lot of money, along with the type of personal injury that it causes. So we have to take a tougher stance on this. I've been endorsed by the Wisconsin Professional Police Association, and I will work with law enforcement to make sure that we have in place what we need to cut down on the number of fatalities, to cut down on the number of crashes, also work to make sure that this doesn't overburden our justice system by having alternative methods to be able to address this. We also have to make sure that people who have addiction problems are able to get the treatments in order to do this. But right now, we don't have tough enough consequences that are going to make a difference in really addressing this. We haven't moved the needle enough, and it's time for Wisconsin to join the rest of the country and realize that this is something that is important to ensuring the safety on our roads.
Governor Walker.
Yeah, this is one of those just tragic issues out there, and one of the biggest problems. I remember years ago when I was first elected official as a state representative from Wauwatosa, one of the most heart-wrenching cases we had to talk about was a family from our area who had lost a son because of someone who had been a multiple repeat offender. Increasingly then, and even more so now, some of the problems you talk about aren't just the numbers, it's the numbers of people who've been out on the road multiple times committing drunk driving. That's something we've got to crack down. And I agree with the other two Attorney General candidates that those first-time offenders, criminalizing that isn't the answer. It's going after repeat offenders, toughening up the penalties. I worked with Jim Ott and others this last session. I will do so. I think this is one of those issues that Republicans and Democrats can come together and work on. But for me, it's one of those where I'm going to work with law enforcement, with the community. I'm pleased, talk about endorsements, to have the endorsement of the men and women of the police department here in Milwaukee, the Milwaukee Police Association, the Milwaukee Police Supervisors, and the Wisconsin Troopers Association, who are the people out on the roads who understand we've got to crack down on people who are repeating this criminal activity over and over again.
Ms. Burke, your rebuttal.
Well, Governor Walker has had 4 years in order to address this. And the fact is that you would avoid a lot of the repeat offenders if you had tougher consequences on that first offense. I think people need to know right off the start, before that they get into those habits of drinking and driving, that there are real consequences that come from that.
Governor?
Again, it's one of those where I was just at our annual governor's conference on traffic safety, which involves not just this issue, but many others. And I'm pleased that with the good work of law enforcement, first responders, the Department of Transportation, and others across the state, we've actually seen traffic accidents go down and some of the safety factors improve over the last year or so. We want to continue to build off of that. And again, the way to do that is to crack down, in this case, on repeat offenders. Show the consequences are serious, but particularly for those who continue to go back on the road even after they've been pulled over and ultimately brought to justice.
Thank you. Our next question, we go to Ted Perry.
I noticed last week you two like to tell stories of people you've met on your job. So let me tell you a story about a Milwaukee family I met this past summer and spent a remarkable evening with them. They own a small business. They raise 4 great kids. They're church-going people. They own their own home. They've done everything society has asked them to do. The home they own, actually not terribly far from here, it just happens to be in one of Milwaukee's most violent neighborhoods. So dangerous, in fact, on a beautiful summer night, they can't even sit on their own front porch out of fear of ricochet or gunfire. Gunfire, which we heard 2 or 3 times during our 5-hour visit. At no time is their teenage daughter allowed to go to the store 2 blocks away. They are virtual prisoners in their own home. So specifically, and really, give me specifics, please. 2 or 3 reasons why that family will be safer and Central City violence will be addressed when you're elected governor. And I believe, Governor Walker, it's your turn to start.
Thank you, Ray. Well, first off, living just a few blocks away from Milwaukee, being here often in my home in Wauwatosa, and having my kids be raised nearby here and born in Milwaukee, that's an issue I've seen all too often on each of your programs in the past with my family growing up here. And it's a challenge, not just now, but it has been in the past. I think one of the most important things we've done this past year was work together with the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County, and the state of Wisconsin, coming together, Republicans and Democrats, to support funding for the Shot Spotter program the Milwaukee Police Department has. That's a program that allows the tracking of those, and we'd like to expand that in the future. It's one of those where it's a good pilot to begin with, but where with remarkable accuracy can not only find out where those shots are fired, but can actually deploy police resources to tackle those even before a call is made to police. And unfortunately, when we looked at it with the chief, many times we found in those initial projects, when they went out and looked at this to begin with, many of the individual instances where a shot was fired, very few times that people actually call it in. And so we've got to find a way to respond to that, to provide the kind of security and safety that families like that need here and across the state of Wisconsin, particularly Milwaukee. And we're committed to expanding that program in the future as long as we continue to success with it.
Ms. Burke?
Well, it is a very serious issue, and to think that right here in one of our own cities that families cannot be outside and feel safe means we need to make changes. Unfortunately, some of the things that Governor Walker has done has made it more difficult for law enforcement to do that. He cut shared revenue to municipalities, which really strained their budgets in terms of providing police and fire and local services. And in fact, according to the latest FBI reports, we have seen an increase in violent crimes that's second in the Midwest. So out of 10 Midwestern states, the second largest increase in violent crime. So we are not doing enough. We have to make sure that we provide adequate funding to our communities to be able to fight this. And when Governor Walker mentions the Shot Spotter, this was actually something he would not include in his budget. He turned down that request by Milwaukee to be able to have that, and was only after a lot of pressure was put on that they restored it to partial funding. So enough is not being done. So what I do is, first of all, work with law enforcement to identify other ways that they can be successful. We have to work with community groups and encourage the police to work with community groups so that it has a grassroots effort. And we have to improve the job situation in the Central City. We know that when you increase employment and jobs, crime goes down. So this cannot be just about law enforcement. It has to be about engagement in communities and economic development.
Governor Walker?
Well, again, here are the facts. The facts are because of our Act 10 reforms, Milwaukee in the first year alone saved roughly $25 million. In fact, in the most recent budget that Mayor Barrett put out, they actually not only saved money, they have enough money to add to the police department. They actually add raises to public employees here in the city of Milwaukee. So they've been able to use our resources to deploy more resources to law enforcement and the programs that will help make families like the one you mentioned safer in the city of Milwaukee.
Ms. Burke?
We just have a lot of work to do, and we have to realize that this really takes a concerted effort. It is not easy work. It is going to be difficult work, but it means bringing people together. It's the type of public-private partnership that I created around education and closing the achievement gap in Madison. We now nearly have 1,000 teens in this program. Most will be their first in their family to do so. That was the schools, it was the Boys and Girls Club, it was the business community, our universities. That's how we're going to address these issues, when you bring people together and take them on.
Thank you. So we now have just about 3 minutes left to go before we transition to our closing statement. So we're going to have one more final question. We have to shorten our responses for this to a minute, please, with no rebuttal time. So we go to Charles Benson for the final question tonight.
And I call an audible Ted Perry.
All right. Ted, back to you.
I think we had time for a short, fun question. And so we're going to let you end on that, the personality question. You are forbidden for campaigning for 1 day, doctor's orders. It's a beautiful fall day. You're told to get out on 2 wheels. Ms. Burke, I imagine you're getting out on a Trek. Governor, I imagine you're getting out on your Harley-Davidson Road King. Where in Wisconsin are you going? Who are you bringing? And why are you going there? Governor, I believe you're up.
Well, one of my favorite routes is 108 from West Salem up to Black River Falls. I'd probably go up that through the cut and then cut on over to Scenic Highway 35 and take it all the way down the Mississippi River. And I'd probably take a bunch of the same buddies I love to go both riding Harleys with and hunting with.
Ms. Burke.
Well, I would head towards Heartland, where I grew up, where my mom, my sister, 2 of my sisters, their families live, and we like to spend time together as a family, and we do quite a bit of cycling together as well, which probably not a surprise. And so that's a great area out in the Heartland, Holy Hill area, one of the most beautiful areas of the state, and just spending time with family, whether it's goes from my nephew Alex, who is 10, all the way up to my mom. She probably doesn't want me to share her age here tonight, but that's what I would do.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for the questions. Now it's time for 3-minute closing statements from each candidate. Because of the coin flip, Governor Walker, you are first.
Well, my first job as a kid was working as a dishwasher at the Countryside Restaurant. And it's amazing to me to think about the son of a small-town minister and the son of a part-time secretary in Delvin growing up to be the leader of this great state. And for that honor, I want to begin by thanking you, the voters of the state of Wisconsin. And I ask for that opportunity to do it again for the next 4 years. As well, I want to thank our moderator and our panelists, and of course my opponent for joining us here tonight, and all of you for tuning in. You know, before I took office, Wisconsin had lost 133,000 jobs. In fact, 133,000 Wisconsin workers, as I mentioned, were out of a job. Back in 2010, at the peak, the unemployment rate in this state was 9.2%. And in my predecessor's previous term, taxes were up, tuition was up, and we had a $3.6 billion budget deficit handed off to us when we took office. Thankfully, things are much better now. We, just as I mentioned at the beginning and repeated throughout this evening's activities, we now have a September where we saw the creation of 8,400 new private sector jobs in the state. That's the best September for private sector job growth in more than a decade. Our unemployment rate is down to the lowest it's been since October of 2008. We're in a position now where Wisconsin ranks 5th in the nation for new manufacturing jobs. And because of that, we were able to invest more than $100 million into worker training to help people get the skills they need for the jobs, the good paying jobs that are available right now. We took a $3.6 billion budget deficit and turned it into a surplus. And we did it the old fashioned way. We actually paid our bills off. Today, the rainy day fund is 165 times bigger than when we took office. And because of that, we now took our surplus and invested it into property tax and income tax cuts that are so effective, a typical family in this state will see an extra $322. On top of that, we froze tuition for the first time at all of our UW campuses for 2 years in a row, first time in our state's history. And now, going forward, we want to continue to make investments in things like helping victims of domestic violence and child abuse. We put more money into helping cancer patients with expanded treatment and covering oral chemotherapy. We put more money into mental health services than any governor in a quarter century. We created a new program to help people with disabilities find meaningful employment within their communities. Now, looking ahead, we've got a plan to make the next 4 years even better, to build off of those successes and to make it even better 4 years from now. I invite you to go to scottwalker.com and look at the details of our plan. It's really a plan about ensuring that everyone who wants a job can find a job, a plan that will help you keep more of your hard-earned paycheck, to help people learn more to earn more, and to help people move from government dependence to work. Growing up as a kid, I don't remember anyone in my class down in Delavan who said, hey, Scott, someday when I grow up, I want to become dependent in the government. No, instead, true freedom and prosperity doesn't come from the mighty hand of the government. It comes from empowering people with the dignity of work. That's the American dream. I want to help everyone here in the state of Wisconsin live their piece of the American dream, and that's why I ask for your vote on November 4th.
Thank you, Governor Walker. And now your 3 minutes, Ms. Burke.
Right. I know Wisconsin can do better. And I know by ensuring that everyone gets a fair shot, we will do better. Governor Walker has had 4 years, and his approach that puts those at the top and special interests ahead of you just isn't working. We are dead last in the Midwest in terms of job creation, and it's not getting any better. 2014 is on track to be the worst year in job creation of the last 5 years. Tax cuts for millionaires and special interests doesn't create jobs. Growing the middle class and small businesses does. If our economy had just kept pace with the rest of the country over the last 3 years, our economy would be $4 billion a year bigger. That's $4 billion that gets spent in our local communities and at our businesses. It's additional tax base on which to fund education and infrastructure while reducing taxes. Think about what that means to you. A better neighborhood school for your children, college that's more affordable, greater economic security in your retirement. The failure of the last 4 years is far too real for far too many. The typical Wisconsin family has seen their income decline by nearly $3,000 a year. $3,000. My approach is different. I will put the politics aside and focus on what works. I don't care if an idea is a Democratic or Republican idea, just whether it's going to get results. Along with ensuring a fair shot for everyone, I want to change the tone. Governor Walker's approach, in his own words, has been to divide and conquer. Well, that's not the Wisconsin way. We have to remember that we're all on the same team, and it shouldn't matter whether Democrat or Republican. We have to put the politics aside and just get the job done. With the direction that I have laid out, I know that based on my experience in business, we can do this. We can be a top 10 thriving economy. We can be a leader in the Midwest. My career has been about seeing the possibilities, taking on the challenges, and getting results. Whether it's from leading European operations to strategic planning at Trek Bicycle, whether it's expanding the Boys and Girls Club, whether it's serving as your Secretary of the Department of Commerce, or creating an educational initiative that has opened doors for nearly 1,000 teens, I see the possibilities and the work that we can do here in Wisconsin to move Wisconsin forward. I can't wait to get to work as your governor. We have everything we need to be a growing, thriving, innovative state that is a leader across the country. So I ask for your vote on November 4th and to join me in building a Wisconsin that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. That wraps up the second of 2 debates in the race for Wisconsin governor. To the candidates, Ms. Burke and Governor Walker, to our panel of journalists, and to our viewers and listeners throughout Wisconsin, thank you and good night.
That concludes tonight's debate between Wisconsin gubernatorial candidates, Democrat Mary Burke and Republican Governor Scott Walker. Wisconsin radio and television stations work together to produce and broadcast this debate as a public service to ensure every citizen of Wisconsin has an opportunity to hear and see the 2 leading candidates for governor. This debate has been sponsored by our WBA Foundation through generous grants from the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities and AARP of Wisconsin. We would like to thank the candidates for their participation, as well as tonight's moderator, Aaron Toner, and panelists Charles Benson, Ted Perry, Mike Strelo, and Kent Wainscott. Remember to vote on November 4th. On behalf of the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association, thank you and good night.